60-minute meeting, a conversation was had about the state of our economy, let's just say today nationally. And there were discussions about the president, there were discussions about Republicans and Democrats alike. There was just a general discussion about it. You know, as I said before, not about saying this is good, this is bad, or anything in between. In your opinion, would that be considered political conversation that wouldn't be allowed if, in fact, that was the primary conversation through you?
Representative Holder-Winfield.
I want to make sure I'm clear when I answer your question. So I would say that first, yes, it's political conversation. You're saying now that they are talking about not only the economy in a large sense, but about the president and different political parties and their response to the economy, I'm assuming?
But they're not, it's not, yes, but there was a general conversation and everybody was, the employer was initiating it for some reason in regards to, say, a business that wasn't doing as well, and they were talking about because the economy has slowed down, their particular business wasn't doing as well and what they could do to increase their business or help their profitability. And because of that conversation about that, they got into the national political situation, and people naturally started talking about Republicans, Democrats, the president, you know, everything involved. Would that be allowed in this?
Well, I would suggest, and again, I am not an expert, but I would suggest that if the conversation was primarily dominated by this conversation and the employer were the one who was having the conversation about the political differences, and the employer did not allow the individuals who had issue with that to leave, then yes, this bill would become problematic for that employer. Through you, Mr. Chair.
Representative Clarity.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Chairman, I'd like to thank the representative for his answers. I think that all of us sitting here listening to this conversation and the several examples we just went through and having no definitive answers to those several examples, and not through any fault of the representative, but it just magnifies the fact that we have a definition of political matters that we're not clear about in Section 6. Talking about requiring a meeting that we're not clear about whether it has to say required, whether it has to, people have to think it's required. So we don't know the definition of required. We don't know the definition clearly of political matters. We don't know if, once you get to the meeting, what the ramifications might be and what the conclusions of those ramifications might be. And if somebody decides that they have been looked unfavorably upon, and they determine that it's because they either went or didn't go to a meeting, then it may or may not be part of this bill. I certainly understand the intention of this, and I think that parts of it, the idea, nobody shouldn't feel intimidated in the workplace. Of course not. I don't think anybody in this room, in this building, or anybody we know feels that anybody should live in a life, whether it's personal, professional, or any way, where they feel intimidated. But you know what? We all have employers. We've all had many jobs. We all go to those jobs, and sometimes we have to go listen to things we don't want to listen to. Now, nobody should be offended. Nobody should feel that they're scared for their safety. But I mean, honestly, let's be honest. We sit there. We went to school when we were young. We had to listen to things we didn't want to listen to. We got jobs. We had to listen to things we didn't want to listen to. We have this job. We all sit in our caucuses. Sometimes we're not happy with the things we listen to. But that's part of being part of a group or having a job or being involved. This bill does not help that. This bill is vague on every single line, just by the conversation we had today. And as I said, through no fault of Representative Holder-Winfield, every single example we could come up with, we don't really have an answer to because it's all vague. It's all subjective. Okay, this is a subjective thing. And unfortunately, I don't believe anybody should feel that way, but this is not helping the problem. And we do this every year. And I don't see how this is solving it. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. Is there further discussion? Senator Gomes and then Senator Bai.
Did you call me? Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I've listened to all the discussions about this bill and all the intents or non-intents of this bill. This bill had one intent when it came out, and the title of the bill is it, Captive Audience. Some of the things that we've mentioned here today, we're talking about whether this should be declared or whether this should have been talked about or that shouldn't have been talked about. But the nature of this bill is not what mainly is being talked about. The intent of this bill is, if I go to a meeting and I do not like what is being said, I have the ability to get up and walk out and say, I do not want to listen to this. And that's where the bill, why the bill is being called captive audience. Some of the last things that the last speaker spoke about some of the things that we're talking about, people being offended, feared for their safety, loss of something. When this bill came out, it came out because of the fact that these things were on the docket. Being offended by something somebody said which you didn't believe in. Fear for something, fear for your safety, not fear for your safety of your person maybe, but fear for the safety of your job. In other words, the company sat you down there to talk about something that you did not want to hear, and if you got up and left, then you were targeted. If you mentioned in the meeting opposition to what they were talking about, then you were targeted. And lots of these declarations that we're talking about wound up as cases for the Labor Department, NLRA. What we are specifically talking about, and I know when this bill came about, I was still working as an international rep for the United Steelworkers. I was involved in this sort of thing when I was out there organizing plants. And all we wanted, if you had an opportunity to talk to a person about a specific thing, then we have the same right to talk to them. When we talked to people that we were organizing, we invited them to a meeting. We did not hold them to a meeting, and we talked about what we feel like we could do for them. Some of these people were going back to the shop, and the next thing they know, they were holding these company meetings, and they were holding them in these meetings and talking about everything except the nature of what their job was. We have no problem at all about a company talking about what their job is and what we need you here for, and this is what's happening with the company and so on and so forth. But when you hold these meetings and you hold them as a captive audience meeting and you talk about something that they do not wish to hear and they have not the ability to walk out of these jobs without fearing the loss of their jobs or fearing some sort of retaliation, this bill covers that. This is not an innocuous bill that people don't need. It's a bill that is needed. It's needed, and when you talk about the right of free speech, nobody, and I heard somebody said this is a violation of the right of free speech. It certainly is not a right of free speech because you have a right to make any kind of speech you want. All we're talking about, do I have the right to walk away from you and not listen to your speech? In many organizations, we sit here in this room here. All of us have certain different attitudes about how we're going to vote. We voice our opinions and everything. There is no retaliation for you voicing your opinion in here. And there's no retaliation for you to vote against something that you don't like. Or like some people do, if they don't want to vote yes or no, they all of a sudden they take a walk. And that is accepted. This bill here is not a bill that denies anybody. I mean, I get sick of hearing about people talking about bills that are not business friendly. Number one,